Yo, 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 what is going on, RoK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today I wanted to touch on something within, again, coming back to the jumper community, that I just think is very important and is something that quite often and unfortunately is overlooked. What I want to talk about today is if you are a new player to Rise of Kingdoms, if you are someone that is considering restarting their account, making a new account, which I guess more or less is kind of the same thing, but just different wording. If you are someone who, well, I guess technically you could make the argument because if you're a vet and you've been playing for a while, then you're probably wanting to start a new account. You could also just be an existing jumper and restart an account. See, there we go. Explanations find their way out of our mouths. I want to talk about what you as the individual player should be looking for in a jump project. Specifically, what you should be doing to identify a project that will fit what you want, right? So if you're a player, you're a free agent, you're someone who's looking for a project to join, I'm going to go over what you should be looking for, questions you should be asking, and trends you should be paying attention to. Before we get started, as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you sub, like, ring the notification bell. Of course, if you want to join and be a part of our conversation, hit up the Discord. You can find a link to that in the pinned comment description right down below. Okay. As always, got to give a shout out to the jumper community. They finally, at least as of recording this video, passed 4K subs. So, golf clap, golf clap. Again, make sure you guys join right there for anything and everything jumper related. You can find a link to their Discord as well in the description, pinned comment down below. So if you're an individual, you're either brand new to RoK, you know nothing about it, you have been playing for a little while, you've never done a jumper before, you've been doing jumps, and you're restarting. Let's touch on what you should be doing. So number one, absolute most important thing, do not settle. Do not be that person who just joins the first project that reaches out to you, the first one that you join on your own, and then that's it. You've just tunnel visioned, and that's your only thing. Understand that you in this situation are the consumer. You have options. If you want to go to this phone company, you want to shop at these other phone companies, and then you pick the best one. You want to shop for insurance and pick the best one. That's what you should be doing. Treat jumper projects the exact same way. Right? You should be going in, and just to give you an example, right? Here's a bunch of active projects, right? Because I do reviews and other things on them as well, right? I'd go into each project and I would look around. I would look at all the jump channels. I would look at the important channels. I would look at management or leadership if they have those. And I would just do it one by one. Go into the next one. Do the same thing. I'd look through everything. I'd read everything. I'd go into the next one. I'd look through everything. I'd read everything. Same thing. I would just keep going down the list, and I would educate myself and do research on any and all of the jump projects, and I would read through them to look at things that I think are important, right? Now, what I may think is important may not necessarily be what you think is important. Let me give an example. You're a brand new player. If you've never played RoK before, you may not necessarily know what to look for, what to look at. However, there are some common denominator things that I'm going to talk about that do not necessarily require you to be proficient in RoK knowledge and or experience. And that's usually how I like to start off. So, number one, if I'm going through a jump project, I want to make sure that their Discord server is just not super busy. In my opinion, I'm a big believer of less is more, right? I don't want to go through there and see hundreds of channels. I would like for there to be concise information provided in the fewest amount of channels possible, where we're not trying to overcompensate for whatever it may be. Number two, information has to be organized. When you are setting up channels, the information has to be professionally structured, formatted. I'm not going to be over here and be the grammar police on anyone, but it's got to look visually appealing. It can't be messy. It can't be a wall of text. You have to format it, at least attempt to do something with it, right? Also, for my one group out there, my boy who was bold and everything, don't be that person, right? Love you lots, but don't bold everything. Number 3, you cannot have unfinished channels. That means you can't have a channel created and it's public to view and there's nothing in there. That's a red flag, right? That means you like to put out unfinished stuff, right? At least in the most case. I'm sure there will be the occasional accident here and there. But if you got 2 or more channels that are just empty, that's a red flag to me. You got 1 channel that's empty, that's at least a general universal white flag, right? Not that you're necessarily giving up, but I mean, you got to start somewhere. So those 3 things I think are really important. Number 4, accessibility. If you reach out to a leader, if you reach out to an officer, if you reach out to the project lead, are those people accessible? Can you reach them? Whether you ask a question in a chat, are one of those people in management or the project leader founder replying? If you maybe ping them for a question, if you send them a DM, will they reply? Right? And I'm not saying that they necessarily have to give you a full answer. I'm talking they could give you a reply that sends you to a place to go and find that answer, right? Or where you can find it. But do they reply? Is it in somewhat of a timely manner? Right? Understanding that, my assumption is I'd like to try and give people like an 8-hour window, right? Unless I know what time zone they're from. If I've never spoken to them before and I see that they're not online, well, my assumption is maybe they're either doing something or they're sleeping. I don't know what part of the world they're in. I don't like to make assumptions. But once I talk to them a few times, I can kind of get an idea on where they're from and are they on when I'm on? And that kind of gives me somewhat of a soft gauge, a soft window on, okay, what's their response range or time range and when they might get back to me. So that's number 4, right? Are they accessible? Number 5, do they post consistent updates? Are they updating channels? Is there some sense of a flow to the project? It's not just dead and stagnant. Like things are still actually happening, right? Whether it's people making posts, if it's them reacting, if it's announcements being made, if there's context or depth within the announcements that's showing you that progression is happening, whether it's stage to stage or you're getting to a certain point and then they're just kind of keeping you apprised on status updates, something's happening. And then, I'm trying to think right now, actually, that sounds really good. I'm shocked that I came up with these 5 things just on the fly. I probably should have wrote this down in an outline. Then I would say number 6 to me would be if I'm looking through chats, right, is there anything that's like, not safe for work kind of stuff? Is there things that are kind of getting to that PG-13 level, right? Is there a sense of respect and decorum that's on the Discord, right, where things just kind of aren't out of hand and it's just people saying and doing whatever they want? I think that shows the level of organization and structure and that the management team hopefully has their hand on the pulse, right, within their group. I think that's a good identifier to look out for. Right, how do those people talk when they post, right? Are we getting, Generation Zers, if you will, that are just acronyming everything and shorthanding all their words? Are we seeing, eloquently strung together full sentences? Or, geez Louise, I'll just take a full sentences in general. Again, right, is someone typing as though, right, the way that they're writing, are they doing it in a way where they're coming off to you as, okay, this is clearly someone who, is coming across professional or at least well put together, right, competent, if you will, and then that gives you an indication, okay, cool, right, leadership at the top, seems to be a little Gucci right now. These are things that I would make the argument any, right, individual can look at and say, okay, I can understand this rationally, logically. I can notice these things happening without having some type of formal training or needing some level of knowledge or deep experience in the field or within the games field. And so Right, I think these things are really important when you're just starting out. Now, some of the things that I also think, and this is going to be a little bit more on kind of game-specific things for those that care, is that there are certain things that I think, when I was kind of going back to the fact that, yeah, you should just join every project. You should hang out in those projects for a couple weeks, see what the consistency looks like, right? See what's happening, see what the engagement level is, see announcements that are being posted. There may be some players out there where you just don't want to wait. Maybe you just want to get into a project right away and just see how it is. Nothing wrong with that. However, I would say as an individual player, keep your options open. Keep your mind open, where I've seen people that go into a project for their first time, no expectations at all whatsoever. They just want to learn. And you know what? If things just don't go well, they'll restart and go do another project, right? They try and use that one as like, hey, I'm just going to get my feet wet. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. The last thing I'll say on this is that if you're a new player coming into the jumping scene, understand that you may end up jumping a couple times. It is not always going to be a one-and-done scenario where you join a project and it's just absolutely going to work out. Right? Unfortunately, the success rate within projects, lasting, even if you're just talking past KVK1, is somewhat low. Right? I don't know if maybe it's around 50%. I've heard some people argue it's probably less than that. I'd like to believe maybe it's somewhere between maybe 30 and 40%, give or take. However, let me preface this with saying I haven't done any actual numbers. I mean, again, I do know all the active projects for the most part, at least have publicly posted on Discord and in one of the big RoK Discords that we can kind of keep notice of. Though being able to then follow up with them and see how they're doing, at each point for when KVK1 is coming up, unfortunately just takes a little bit of work, right? It's not as though it's difficult by any means, right? You essentially just find out when they land in their final kingdom, right? You estimate it out about, 80 days or so until they get to around the start of KVK1 EOTC, and then you follow up and just, reach out to a couple people that are in that project and just ask them how things are going. But it's just the grunt work, right? It can be done, but it does obviously take time and then try to figure out, right, and look at those percentages and look what the numbers and actually try and get some hard data behind it, which would be great to do, right? I'll be honest, if I was making, full-time money from this, I totally would do it, because, I mean, those statistics are numbers no one really has, and to me, that stuff is really interesting. With that in mind, so I don't sit here and kind of run off on random tangents, I think that's going to do it for me. Right, so if you take away anything from this video, I hope it's that you're keeping yourself open, you're joining multiple projects, you're hanging out in them for a while, you're paying attention to these identifiers, right? And remember, this is if you're just a brand new player, and I would make the argument really for anyone, but with more emphasis on brand new players who just do not know anything about RoK at all, and you're just getting your feet wet for the first time. So yeah, that for me, I think, is the good stuff. If I leave you with something, I'll leave you with this, right? If you are someone who has been jumping, let's just say for a while, or you're just familiar with RoK, what I will say, if I was to give you the identifiers I personally like to go with, which is going to be, let me see here if I can do this. Oop, you know what? That formatting is too big. So we're going to just do 36. That should be a little better. And you know what? I think 48 might actually be okay. Just have to widen this. Here we go. So let me show you this. So this is my essential kind of table of contents when I look at projects, right? I truly believe at least the first 10 things. Number 11 is optional. And some of you who watch my jump reviews, you probably have seen this. But if you're someone who's familiar with jumping, you're a little bit more familiar with RoK, these are what I would say are 10 things on top of the other things I mentioned that you as a player, as a jumper, should look out for when you join a project. Do they have all of these 10 things available in their project? If they do, then I would make the argument that their preparation, before doing anything else, before they even start, their preparation is pretty sound, right? And I would argue that's a project that you can, whether you want to say consider, but you can look at a little bit more. That's one that you could say, okay, you know what, I'm going to hang out here for a little bit. I'm just going to see how things are done. That's one where you'll kind of give them a little bit of your time of day. And again, that's essentially a table of contexts, an index, right? That kind of is in short where they have all their channels listed, like or relevant channels listed that pertain to jumping, and they give you a brief description on that. So you can go there and you can find everything, and you can kind of click where to go. Announcements, it's the same thing like what I touched on a little bit earlier, right? Do you have organized? Do you have professional announcements? Is it not just a wall of text? Do you have some structure? Is there an identity to your announcements? Right, I think this is so underrated because honestly, a lot of projects I go into, they just don't format. Not to say they don't know how to, but they just don't format their announcements. And to me, that just comes off amateurish. Number 3 is positions and applications. Right? Do they have a channel that lists off the details of the positions that are available, the expectations, the responsibilities, and the tasks, whether it's all of them or just some of them in a highlight format? Do they have that listed? And then do they have a link to their application, or are they using a bot or something? Number 4, do they have a jump plan? A jump plan essentially is what's like the high-level plan on how you're going to jump, right? It can also be, if you really want it to, be I mean, you could argue a guide. That's kind of more in Jump Kingdom resources. For me, a plan is really, this is what you can expect when you're jumping. This is what's going to happen day 1. This is what happens day 2, day 3, day 4, all the way to Final Kingdom. And then number 5, Kingdom Plan Goals, right? This is, what's your kingdom plan when you finally get into Final Kingdom? What are the goals? How are you going to manage certain events? What's your outlook on KVK? How are you going to do territory distribution? How are you going to work with other alliances? Who's going to get certain structures? Who's going to get Lost Temple? How are you going to do diplomacy? How are you going to communicate between alliances? Do you actually have a plan? And then we have Jump and Kingdom Resource. This is kind of like a jump guide. Kingdom Resource could be things like best practices, how to level, how to progress quickly, what commanders to focus on for PvP, how to min-max your research, your academy, how to do building levels, waiting for max health before using speed up, stuff like that. Introductions and resumes. To me, this is really important because this is not only an introduction, and your resume sometimes can be an introduction, right? It's just, if you don't have a comprehensive resume or something that's really detailed out, then I would recommend adding, I should say, an introduction. Introduction would be something where you as the individual within management, this is more a management thing. So if you're an officer, a leader, a project lead, founder, you're doing an introduction on yourself, but then you're also listing out your resume, right? Kingdoms you played in, maybe how long you were there for, things you accomplished, right? Any types of accolades, if you will. If you've ran other jump projects before, right, listing those out, how did they go? Being humble in that regard and transparent, because you shouldn't look at it necessarily as a weakness. You should look at it as, okay, hey, I'm being upfront with people, and that way, they know. Because this is the thing, regardless if you had a project that has gone extremely successful, which in my opinion, if you have a project that's gone extremely successful, I don't know why you would leave that. The other side of it is that, right? Yeah, I mean, I can make the argument if you've done a jump project and your kingdom, made it all the way to SOC, and you survived SOC, and then you've been there for, let's say, I don't know, a year, or longer, maybe a year or two. I could still make the argument, man, that's really cool, right? Maybe you're just someone who likes the test of doing that. I guess to each their own. I just don't know if I've ever seen that myself. And then recruiting. Right, so recruiting is essentially where you have a channel that says, hey, here's how we're going to recruit people. If you want to help recruit, this is what you can do. Here's a jump ad. Here's a Google Doc that has the format and everything listed there so others can just copy paste. Here's a list of channels that a project has listed, places that players can go and recruit from. Do you have a ready check? A ready check is basically just like a check-in, right? So it's you have a channel and they just do something like a green check if they're going to jump with you or not. You can do a single check, just keep it super simple. You can do like a region ready check where if you split, as an example, you could split it to, North America, Asia, Europe, and then that way you can try and place people, based on their time zones for higher peak activity when you split them up. Right? It just depends on how your project is, but at least having a single ready check at minimum is good. And then all you really have to do at that point is you just go through the reactions. You look at who's still in your kingdom or in your Discord, and then anyone that's left, you just remove them, right? That way you kind of keep up to date with an accurate ready check. And then number 10, meetings. Does the project do meetings, right? And then do they do them weekly, bi-weekly? To me, those are kind of the only options, right? I myself like to do them weekly, but I think it's important that they give that availability and that space for players to go and join, to hear from the leaders, because, and this isn't a knock on anyone, but to be fair, I don't want to say to be fair, I've heard things from people where it's, man, I went to this meeting and it just sounded like this 10-year-old was running it, right? And let me just say, nothing against anyone who's on the younger side. I know quite a few players that are in high school, and these are people that I would, without a doubt, effortlessly approve to run an alliance as a leader in one of my projects. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's, all the time. It's definitely few and far between in my experience. But that to some people is a turnoff, right? Now, yeah, you can make the argument that's probably biased because you maybe at least hear the people out. But the thing is that by having and doing meetings, it allows for you to hear from leadership, from management, and that can be another facet for you as an individual player on whether you want to continue in a project or not. And also, can you ask questions? Can you engage? Can you interact? Kind of goes back to that accessibility thing. So with that in mind, that is pretty much it for me. Again, I just wanted to go over both of those sides, right? So, what do I think is really important when you're starting out as an individual jumper? Right, joining multiple projects, feeling them out. If you're a new player, things that you can look out for. If you're an existing RoK player and you've already been going for a little while, but you're looking to restart or just finally get into jumping, right? These are things that I think you should look out for on Discords, because trust me when I say it will increase the chances of you joining a project that is more well put together than not, which then transitions into you having a better first introduction or a better continued day-to-day playing experience when you finally get to Final Kingdom within that project, right? And that's the key, right? You want to be able to get into a project and things just go, hopefully, incredibly well, where you're not at Civil War, you're not having to, fight for 90 or, the entire time up till KVK 1, right? You really want to try and get into a project that's going to put you in a situation where you can either do minimal fighting to unify and get to where you need to get, or you're able to pretty much kind of go right into unification mode, and then you're able to develop your account at a rate of 100%, right, up until KVK 1, essentially unimpeded. Those are pretty much kind of the two, kind of the end goal, right? Is that's really ideally where you want to try and get to. So with that in mind, that is it for me. As always, I hope you enjoy. Let me know anything and everything down in the comments below, right? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Why or why not? Right? Please, would love to hear from anyone and everyone. Until next time, I will catch you later.